So I wanted to welcome everybody to another segment of Soffer Longevity. Really, it's the Doctor's Lounge format where we sit and we discuss what's interesting in sort of healthcare, particularly as it relates to longevity and living longer and better, and what's swirling around the internet and what actually would 2 or 3 doctors sort of talk about at the Doctor's Lounge that they think works for them. Today's segment is brought to you by a company called Longevity AI, and they are probably the preeminent software-based longevity medical record system out there. And we are very happy to not only have them as a sponsor, but we use them in the office. So let's kick right into it with Dr. Maklad, our resident functional medicine and longevity expert here at Soffer Health. Since today's episode is really going to be about cognition and how do we think better longer, what is your kind of couple of things that you tell patients about maximizing their general cognition?
That it's what we know now, that the brain can change. So you're kind of not destined to, having a decline in cognition. No, the brain neuroplasticity, so that's what they call it. You know what
the best way I heard neuroplasticity mentioned, and I don't mean to interrupt, but that's how we are at the Doctor's Lounge. We just jump in there in between usually bouts of eating. But we should add that. We should add like a really sloppy buffet. So I love the ski slope idea. So those of us that have been skiing, you kind of go and you see kind of tracks that are laid. And as they get laid, they get kind of like icy and rigid. There's all this fluffy snow on the sides. I always like to kind of jump out and make new tracks. They say that that's kind of a way of looking at the neuroplasticity issue, where if you want to keep your brain connections from becoming too rigid and therefore not growing, not elastic enough, that you have to use all this other fluffy stuff. Have you heard that? I love that metaphor.
I do really like that. That is a really good way of explaining it. So so that's really what it is that you want to make new tracks, and the brain has that ability to make new connections for your whole life. So
we'll go in reverse. Like I have, I don't know if you've noticed, but I got a little salt, maybe a little more sort of salt in my pepper or whatever it's called. Like I'm graying out a little bit. So I get more questions. What do you think about, when you're going to retire? What do you think about retirement? I get patients now that have been treating them long enough that talk to me about retirement. There's a really good group of studies showing how bad
retirement is for you. Yeah, when you stop, you lose all that input and all the thinking that you have to do. And when, you just retire, and then a lot of patients or retirees will kind of just be like, okay, well, I'm not really sure what to do with myself today, and kind of just put around.
Right, the fluffy sides of the ski slope
are not being used.
Not getting used as much, and you don't get that. And I mean, it's a simplistic way of putting it, but for certain, one of the things we've added for years, we would add like, okay, what are this patient's risk factors for upcoming heart disease? Smoking and not eating right and not sleeping right. And we would also ask him about impending near or levels of retirement.
Yes.
Are they retired as a separate and distinct risk factor? So something to consider is even younger people plan their careers. You really want to have the ability to have that social connection and relevance and reasons to kind of, explore new challenges.
I think with the social connection, I think that's the biggest part, because they seem like they'll start to get isolated, and, they don't go out with their work friends, or, just not going to events anymore. So I think the social part.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Like so many of the studies that you and I are reading, the different risk scores that are out there, and they include like heavy important things like, but your cholesterol level, maybe your LP little a, ApoB, genetic analysis, epigenetic, all these like complicated things. And then they always go social connections.
Yes.
And it seemed like that
something so simple, but as as you age, you don't have those social connections anymore, and being lonely is a risk factor by itself.
I think it reinforces that kind of those hard, icy, sort of back and forth ski patterns of thinking that don't get input from outside, don't make you go, oh, there's a different point of view, there's a different point of view, there's a, it doesn't, when you're not challenged socially, it seems to be one of the negative things. So let's also maybe sort of bust a few myths, with some of the patients we've seen recently that come in with some of these things that think maybe make their cognition better or cause them to possibly go down paths that aren't helpful. Like, let's talk about even like crossword puzzles. I thought crossword puzzles were a great thing, but I read not so much that there were other forms like the brain IQ and things that
speed training. So it's how fast you're solving these puzzles or things that are coming into your periphery that you're noticing. So they noticed, with the studies that they did, they found that was actually improved, with doing these trainings compared to doing like crossword puzzles or memorization things. So I guess it's just activating different pathways.
Yeah, I did that. I played with that Brain IQ software, which was really fairly amazing. I believe it was free.
It is, yeah.
And it has been researched with thousands of people.
Yes.
And they show, well, tell me what your experience has been with it, if you've had much.
I've had patients, I tell them that this is like a game I'm going to have you play and do it for an hour a day. And they do notice their processing speed as they're progressing, doing it for weeks. So it's just trying to increase their processing speed.
Yeah, I mean, just so for those of us who are listening or viewing who haven't had an experience with Brain IQ, it basically will put things in your view on your computer or your phone or what have you. And then you have to calculate how many people you see in a particular view, right? That kind of.
And there's also stuff that kind of pops up in the periphery, so that you're supposed to pay attention to, or if you see it. So there's different games, and I'm sure it progresses as you get better at them.
Yeah, it's the way of hitting the parts of the brain that require stimulation to possibly stay more alive or even grow. It's interesting. First of all, I love that Brain IQ. I'm going to recommend it for everybody. It's very simple. It's free. And I do think it will keep people sharper longer. That's one of many things we're going to talk about today. But I did a brain MRI for no good reason.
Yes.
And
just to get a baseline.
Well, our one of our North Stars, a guy by the name of Eric Topol, who wrote now a famous book called Super Agers, where he really went through the data as of 2024, 2025, was really anti-whole body MRI, kind of saying, well, there are a lot of people that get it and they find abnormalities, they go down rabbit holes, and those rabbit holes can be both expensive and maybe even toxic, if you're getting a surgery to look at something that wasn't not necessarily a problem. Okay, I get that. But I also, and you and I probably have so many patients that have had these whole body scans and they found something and it got it early and potentially cured them. So I did it kind of for that.
Yes.
I also did it as a baseline, so that if I ever do have something that's hurting me or bothering me,
and something to compare to.
Right. And one of the things, since today is on cognition and thinking, brain power was my brain. And certainly the brain is made up of multiple lobes, and looking at the size of those lobes can tell you kind of your brain age, and it can also be a good baseline to see if it's shrinking, because a particular lobe in the brain that starts to shrink suggests risk for dementia, not to mention.
So imagine if you had a 40-year-old and you had that, like the neuroquant, and did that on them, and then you had something to compare to in 10 years and be like, oh, okay, this specific region's starting to get smaller, your white matter's not as much, then you know that things are changing. And
so being that we're not in the actual doctors, virtual doctors lounge, the NeuroQuant and Dunedin Pace are software mechanisms that look at these MRIs of the brain and score them towards a biological age of normals. So like the NeuroQuant or Dunedin Pace are like thousands and thousands of people with their chronologic age and biologic age kind of put together, and therefore you see how you do against that particular norm, and it can give you an idea of, hey, maybe that crossword puzzle isn't working for you. Maybe you should use this,
Brain IQ
software, or a new hobby or whatever it is. Maybe not retire, or go back to work, or start volunteering, or whatever it is. So I think that that the software is going to lead us down those pathways, and kind of like, I don't know about you, but I remember when my kids were born, we got some of the amniotic.
Oh, the cord blood.
The cord blood, because we were, oh my God, if they should ever have some sort of in those days, I think it was mostly for lymphoma type, maybe blood disorders, that those stem cells could be useful, and they ended up, thankfully, not having to use them, but
they're banked somewhere.
So now I know I got a banked, not just an MRI of my brain, but a full body MRI. So if I ever want to see, a sort of one against the other, then that would be great. The thing is, it's probably better to do it with an MRI than a CAT scan, because you're not expending radiation, right? The MRIs are magnets.
Yes. And you could literally get one every year and
not expose yourself to radiation.
All that radiation, yeah.
There is this irradiation of your wallet that can happen.
Yes, that,
even doctors have to pay for that. We even think about that. But yeah, so I don't know that I'll do it every year, but I am looking to some of my North Stars, which then we can bring back and tell all of our listeners or watchers, I guess, about it also. So, one of the things to think about. So we have some diagnostic things we can do, like an MRI of the brain, and there are cognitive tests that we can do that are very old. They're just kind of asking questions and repeating things. There are some newer things that you and I have seen where you kind of put on some goggles.
That visual,
Apparently the eye is a very good indicator, as it's very close to the brain.
Yeah, they're just watching the movement of the eyes. So, I'm not sure how they're tracking it, but they do give you an output of like how your brain function is just by watching the eyes.
Yeah. It is amazing how the eye is kind of, the
window to the soul.
Window to the soul. And it's also the window of the heart, and it's the window of the brain, and it's the window to like the pancreas.
Yes.
So it is a very important and underutilized tool, and probably leading. They say that the reason the internet got so popular was because of, I'm going to let you get, what industry brought the internet to its prominence? I'm asking you as just kind of a joke.
Okay,
as a joke. Porn.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Porn.
Didn't think about that.
Porn is what brought the internet to its major prominence. And I'm not so sure that I think AI has been other things, but that is what really drove the early days of the internet. And similarly,
I thought it was games.
Games, yeah. Sexy games. But in terms of this longevity and the usage of AI, it seems to be the eye itself. AI, maybe spelled A-E-Y-E. AI in the eyeballs, looking at the retina, can now tell us so much that we had never realized before. In fact, there's some companies that are using it in an internal medicine office, because you don't have to have a doctor's a part of a screening. Have you seen those?
Yes, they're actually starting to roll it out in a lot of primary care offices, where you can do your diabetic screen and everything right there, and it takes 5 minutes. They've also found that it can diagnose Parkinson's, which is like amazing. The risk of developing Parkinson's prior to.
Through an AI, meaning like a full self-driving or whatever, and a sort of a machine that you just put your eye up to, and no one has to read it. The it does the analyses.
Yeah.
And similar to Longevity AI, which again is this week's sponsor, and yet also something that we use daily, is now coming up with sort of big databases where they're publishing millions of people's risk factors and looking at different ways of personalizing them. So, for instance, the Framingham study was really great for sort of middle-aged men. And Prevent, which is much better, which is the new ACC guidelines for cardiovascular risk, is better. But then there's this moving thing that's using information that is like there right now and asking it different questions. Cognition, hopefully being an important part of that. The problem with cognition is we haven't had a lot of really great, diagnostic tests for it. But we're starting. So one of the more important ones for people to consider is their risk for Alzheimer's, which is almost kind of a part of a spectrum of neurodegenerative diseases, because it's so frequently called Alzheimer's. It's not Alzheimer's, but ApoE being a great marker. What do you think about that? Have you seen that on patients? I know you saw it on me, so you can even talk about it with me. Go ahead.
So we can screen for the ApoB genes. So it's we can figure out which allele you have. So with you, we did it through Allelica, and you figure out which ones you have.
Right.
And that puts you either at a low risk or high risk.
Right. And thankfully I was at a low risk, even though I had some cognitive impairment in my father, but was not Alzheimer's. And, I was thankful to find out that I did not carry those genes at a high risk. Had I carried them at high risk, that is now the question, right? Like, so, okay, great. Now you're at high risk. What do you do? And I've seen quite a few people that have come out positive. And what do they do? And I've had to have that conversation, which isn't easy because there is no, cure per se. But there are things we can do to stop it, to slow it, to modify it.
Yeah, to modify the risk factors. So if you're smoking, drinking, you have diabetes, high cholesterol, all those are modifiable factors.
And the neuroplasticities. Maybe you want to do a brain IQ versus a crossword. Maybe you want to take a different way to work. Maybe you want to park farther and walk more.
Yes, exercise, definitely, the different types of exercise.
Maybe you want to consider some supplements. Tell me about some of the supplements that you have used in the past in regards to cognition.
So it was actually that study that they did in those older adults, just them taking a multivitamin on a daily basis actually improved their cognition. So sometimes just those very basic vitamins helps.
Which you gave me, and it sits in my bathroom. And oddly enough, and I got to go over this. It says take 3 times a day. Is that possible that I have a vitamin you're supposed to take an MVI, a multivitamin, supposed to take 3 times a day? Because it says you wrote on it on the script.
Was it the multivitamin?
Maybe
or was
I missed
it the
them
homocysteine?
but nevertheless, the point is that you want to take a multivitamin that is the correct one, and even some of our North Stars, some of the very academic doctors have agreed that recent study was pretty profound, that taking a multivitamin can, improve your longevity. It seems kind of counterintuitive. Well, what's in the multivitamin? Well, it's usually a relatively common combination. You want to take it from a reputable place. But, I feel better about what you and I have been doing, which is taking something that has a deficiency and fixing it, which isn't so much the case in multivitamins. Now, I'm thankful that my well, maybe I am thankful. My vitamin D was low. That's what spurred me to start taking supplements in general, because I'm a big guy. I'm in the sun a lot. I eat a lot. I've never had a nutritional deficiency. It's always been the opposite. And here I was with multiple deficiencies, not many, but a few. Vitamin D being one that everyone knows about. And the
folate, which was kind of also because you eat a varied diet. So.
Well, I just think that this goes down to another thing around cognition, which is the microbiome.
Yes.
And, understanding that your microbiome is possibly the best possible microbiome also for reducing your risk of cognitive decline. And when I did my microbiome testing, I also found a bit of a variance, and you got me on these probiotics, which, I don't know, gosh, I feel like my digestion's a little bit better. Okay. And I hope that will mean a bunch of these millions or trillions of bacteria are doing a better job in releasing back into my system a platform that is healthier.
Because they also help you make vitamins.
So with that sort of bacteria stuff, it's interesting that I've seen some data on, it's kind of gross, so if you're listening or watching the podcast while you're eating, put down the fork, fecal transplants.
Yes, absolutely amazing. So they found they were studying it more for chronic C. diff. And these were patients that were just getting antibiotics, both IV, oral, which way they could try to get rid of the C. diff. They found that they would do a fecal transplant, and the C. diff improves, which is just absolutely amazing. That without the antibiotics, without all that, because they're just replacing the bacteria that they don't have anymore, and it kind of pushes off the C. diff.
Absolutely. Sort of never thought of before kind of medicine, if we start imagining that versus trying to eat something that has to go through the, the stomach and the small intestine. And,
they are making it into capsules now, so you can.
I wanted to ask you about that. So I thought about that today. Maybe others have thought about that. No, I'm not. We're not talking about enemas right now. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the capsules, because for the first time in my life, and part of it to ensure that I don't ever get the least amount of cognitive impairment that is potentially in my future, is taking these capsules, right? But I noticed, like, I'm taking, 3 or 4, I guess they're sort of gel coats or some sort of a gelatin. But has there ever been studies at, like, what that's doing to you, the gelatin, even from a microbiome or a colon perspective, like, they're not tiny.
No,
the vitamin D is tiny.
Yeah, but the other pills they're a good size. Yeah, so you're trying just to make sure that the capsules are like a vegetarian gelatin and that they just get absorbed, and that's the end of that.
It does make me think about it. I'd like less than more. For instance, one of the things we know about for, neuroplasticity, if you will, reduced cognitive impairment, neurodegenerative diseases, comes from, antioxidants, right? So particularly when it comes to fish oils, which we've pretty much found out that fish oils can be very helpful, but it's even better eating actual fish.
Yeah.
So, because when you're doing fish oils, typically they're coming in capsules.
But the problem with the fish, though, is like with the
mercury.
The mercury. So then you start getting elevated mercury levels, especially if you're eating like big fish.
Big amounts of sort of the colder,
larger fish.
Which goes down to this personalized thing, which you've taught me can be done now. So when anybody either joins our particular longevity program or probably any longevity program across the country, you get a battery of new types of tests.
Yes.
And those tests do things like check your mercury, check your toxin levels, check your vitamin levels and your pre-hormone and hormone levels. And these levels that typically certainly aren't checked and usually are not covered by insurances, but aren't expensive and aren't hard. You get them back really quickly, and with the software that we use, I feel like I'm shamelessly plugging them, but I'm not. I just believe in the longevity AI capacity for me to keep it all together for each and every patient on a personalized basis. You have to do that. You get 50 new tests, 7 are wrong. You got to remember how those 7 are relating to that particular patient, because if not, and you're off by one or two, that may be the one or two that worsens their cognitive capacity into the future.
Yeah, and it's almost impossible for a person to keep all that information and tie it together without a little help.
You know what I did the other day? By that I mean this morning. I went and I re-looked at my Apple Watch online to figure out the things that it's doing that I didn't really take full advantage of. And I found like 3 new things that I wasn't using as well, particularly related to sleep. Obviously exercise, but even like an alarm feature, safety feature. So
they have the fall, right?
They have EKG that's, you can take a quick EKG. I actually took my watch off once and used it on someone else who didn't have one to check their EKG and was able to have a diagnosis. Yeah, I stopped wearing the fancy watches because when that happened, I was actually with some very close friends and someone had an issue, did not have an Apple Watch. I took mine off and put it on them, and I was able to diagnose an arrhythmia.
Wow.
So, how does that relate to cognition? I don't know. That they do have things like the mindfulness reminders, and you could probably set up reminders, just basic stuff like remind me to do brain IQ, which I strongly recommend it. Everybody really look at that because it's kind of fun. It's a game. It doesn't mean that every game works. It means this particular game has been studied and has worked. Which is one of the things that like we do differently on this podcast and you and I in our lounge than anybody else, because we really try and stay away from things that haven't been studied. We'll talk about them. We'll talk about peptides. We'll talk about supplements that haven't been proven. But we won't give them credence where it's not yet there. And so that's what I think people are kind of looking for. They want to know things that we believe in and part of the things that we do in our own life. And speaking of which, I would like to ask you, because I know you just did a significant fast, how do you think that helped your cognition, both short and long term?
Well, short term, I felt that I was definitely more...
Tell us about the fast for those who weren't here last week.
Yeah, so the fast, it was a 5-day fast, but it was a modified fast, so it wasn't just water. I was, so very low calorie, so like bone broth and stuff like that. And I just amazingly, the sleep was so much better after, day 4, day 5, and it's kind of persisted. You feel like you're sharper. And it was kind of like a reset for the system.
Is it maintaining itself as of today?
So far, yes.
Really?
Yes. So I'll tell you when I decide to do the next one.
So do you feel like you felt that? I mean, obviously when you go to sleep and you've had a good night's sleep and you wake up, you know it. Like,
you know it, yes.
So is that how you feel like every day?
Yes, that I wake up and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go.
That's awesome.
So just, waiting for that decline again, but then I just do another fast.
Well, as you know, I went through a period of not sleeping so well, and I came to you about it, and you gave me a bunch of suggestions because the clarity. I wasn't, I can drink kind of enough caffeine right now where I can get to that clarity moment, but then there's that crash at the end of the day, and that sucks because I like to play pickleball, I like to do other things. I'd made a couple of adjustments that helped me to sleep and therefore helped me to think better. And I think, well, if I can maintain them, have long-term benefits. And I'll go through them and listen, we can talk about them. But I made the room colder. I happen to have the luxury of one of those Sleep Number beds. That is not a sponsor, and I don't want to speak for them, but oh my God, that thing's amazing because my wife wouldn't be able to handle it, and we've got split beds. So not only do I go colder, but I also warm my feet.
So you can adjust that part too.
And she would sometimes wants the opposite, so it's perfect. So I made it colder, and I gave myself a sleep, like the way it gets colder through the night. So I spent some time and said, okay, this one to be more cold, less cold, and then wake up. Amazing,
and it works.
Amazing. Took a bit of magnesium because we found through my blood studies that might benefit, and it did. More.
And keeping the room dark, as dark as possible.
Yeah, trying to push the phone away for sure. So when I wake up, I don't don't use it as much. Sometimes I still do, but as much. I really do do less of that. And maybe most important of all is I try and get to that 3 hour I haven't eaten before I go to sleep.
Yes.
That's a big deal because when I was younger, no problem. Could have a big meal. Oh, my belly full. I'm going to take a good nap. No, that doesn't work probably after 50 because I've been suffering from that for about 10 years. So up to 50, no real issues. But afterwards, and some people feel it earlier, issues. So if you can get 3 hours before, after your last bite of food, I'm not talking even dessert. I'm just like, I mesmerize myself or hypnotize, as they say. Once I have my tea,
you're done.
I'm not allowed to eat anything.
That's it.
Like sometimes I have like tea with maybe a graham cracker or some piece of chocolate, whatever it is I want. But once that tea hits, I'm telling myself I'm done. And then I got to get 3 hours. So it's whether it's I read, watch television, even go for a walk.
Yes.
I can have water, plenty of water, but no food. And I definitely find that I sleep better. And my continuous glucose monitoring suggested that I had a more even.
So one day I'll be able to convince you to do the 5-day fast.
I'll do a 5-day fast. Just it'll take me 2 years because I'll do about a half a day
here, half a day there,
half a day every other month or something. I think I could do it with the right effort, but I'm not convinced enough of the long-term effects. So I know that there's some short-term effects, but of the long-term effects, do you just kind of come back? And so what I've been doing is I do a daily 16-8. So I stop eating at around 8 p.m. and start eating at 12 p.m., after lunch the next day. And it's not even hard for me to do anymore. And I'm not losing weight with it. I cannot lose weight with it, but I can maintain my weight within a 3% margin with doing that. I do want to try it because I've read about the way that these age-related cells sort of. Well, go ahead, give everybody your thoughts on it because it makes a lot of sense.
So you're able to kind of clear out the senescent cells. So those cells that are hanging around really not doing anything but just causing kind of a low-grade inflammation. So when your body doesn't have to work about digesting your food, it can start to get rid of this other stuff that's going on in the body. So it really is just giving your body time to kind of repair itself.
I've heard it said this follows, that the body needs to be challenged. When it's challenged, I guess, Darwinianly, through evolution, whether you believe it or not, but we were decided to overcome it. So if there's something negative was happening to us, great, let's send out the cells that circumvent that. That's kind of survival of the fittest. So one of those things is when you're starving, you need to be like clear-eyed to go out and figure out how you're going to get some food. Because if you just got hungry and got sleepy and died, you wouldn't
that would
go
be the
on,
end of that.
right? That'd be the end of that line of succession. So in this case, we are it's become pretty clear that these Darwinian evolutionary hacks, if we can figure out how to use them, and that it appears that either fasting or fasting mimicking, which there's a couple of really good ways of mimicking the fasts. There's a great group out of USC with I think his name is Victor Longo, was a doctor at USC, which I spent some time at during my fellowship, where they came up with foods that made you feel like you were fasting, but you could still eat some, still low calorie and whatnot. And those fasting mimicking diets can be helpful if you want to give that fasting sensation. And I hear it does, we've read, you and I know, that it seems to last longer than the time of the fast.
Yes.
But we don't know the long-term benefits. So does it, really reduce cancer? Does it really reduce neurodegenerative or cardiac disease? That's still unclear. So until it's a little more clear, I'm not either recommending it or doing it. But I do believe the up to between 12 and 16 hour fasts have been shown to be beneficial.
Yes.
In just you take in less calories and you get more insulin sensitivity.
Yes.
So if you just go on that alone, you're going to eat less because you're taking out at least a meal, it's going to be better for you. So that I do recommend, and I do actually
do it.
Do it. So yeah, but I can tell you that I was proud of you. I was like, wow. And I talked to you during the whole thing, and you were, especially day 3, you were back to,
normal. Yeah, I didn't feel like it wasn't bothering, like that sense of hunger kind of finally went away.
So we've talked about a little bit about genetics in ApoE, which is just one of the genetic factors for some of the neurodegenerative diseases. There are others that have been typed. There's the sort of epigenetic factors that I think companies like Longevity AI and other big data aggregators are trying to figure out on the DNA methylation and the what genes are being turned on or off, because it seems like, from what I've read, most of what genes are only a small percentage. So it's debatable if it's 10, 20, 30%, but they're a small percentage of what the outcome is when it comes to most of our disease processes. They're a part of it. It's good to know, but they're really not the major part. The part is still, all of the lifestyle choices. And now that we're starting to be able to type the nutritional, sleep, exercise, things
all
like that.
All those things that are, that go into how your genes are being turned on and off. Yeah.
And then, of course, within the exercise, it's which types of exercise. Obviously, a combination of both resistance and aerobic exercise, probably to breathlessness, which we call sort of the zone 2.
Yeah.
But not the high intensity stuff, because it may be less sustainable mostly, and the zone 2 seems to work the best. The VO2 max being a great test that we do in the office. A lot of doctors do them as part of their stress testing these days. So getting that as a barometer. Of course, now the new microbiome information. I mean, these are all great bits of information that are getting clarity, and that hopefully, with a good diagnostic test like we're doing on the longevity side of our practice, not really the insurance-based traditional side, because it's just not there yet.
They haven't caught up yet.
So doing that is going to give us both good baselines and then the ability to use all of these new hacks, supplements, treatments. Oh, I wanted to ask you about HBOT, so hyperbaric oxygen and cognition. What are your thoughts on that, having a certification and having a lot of experience in it like you do?
So it's very, very interesting to see the patients that have like long COVID, concussions, even post-stroke. We had a Parkinson's patient. So it really does help the brain. I mean, the brain does use a lot of oxygen. So you're giving it more, and it's able to function better. So
for those that don't know about hyperbaric, I'll give them a quick summary of what it is.
So hyperbaric oxygen therapy is, we put you in a chamber. It's filled with 100% oxygen, and then it's pressurized. So then that pressurization causes the oxygen to actually dissolve into the plasma. So you're not as reliant on the red blood cells to be delivering the oxygen, and it can get into much smaller areas because all your cells are bathed in that plasma. So they're able to take up the oxygen a lot more freer than if we're just waiting for the red blood cells to deliver it. And they just, it's amazing how they just, like, everybody seems like they perk up when they get a treatment.
So it's funny, I've been doing a lot of research recently on two things. Hyperbaric oxygen is very interesting to me, as the data has been interesting in and around cognitive impairment, so brain function, wound function, which is a big part of our cardiovascular venous practice, and by virtue of those two things, longevity in general. I've also been very interested in sauna therapy, because that's since this Finnish study came out showing thousands of people in Finland and how they had these huge longevity benefits, longevity, like 30, 40%, like incredible longevity benefits from going to a sauna and getting somewhere around 50 15, 20 minutes in a sauna, but both the HBOT and the sauna required two things that make it hard for adoption, which is you got to do it probably a minimum of 4 times a week. I mean, there was incremental benefits, but the sweet spot seemed to, on both of them, be somewhere around 4+ times.
4+ times. So it's usually recommended 5 days a week.
HBOT.
HBO, yeah. And the concussion patients, they need to do it 5 days a week because it's a cumulative effect on their brain. And they're doing it, for multiple sessions. It's not a one and done kind of thing. So they're there for, 20, 30 treatments.
So I'm not done an HBOT. I need to do it.
Yes.
I need to give it a go just because when I speak about it, I need to be a little more knowledgeable. But I am a big diver, or was until recently. I would go diving a few times a year.
This is much easier. You just lay there.
Yeah. But I got to tell you, I always felt the clarity, general clarity, maybe a little dopamine hit or euphoria that I felt diving, particularly the deeper dives, but was great. Maybe I never knew if it was the oxygen because you're getting oxygen delivered, or was it the pressure? But I really, really enjoyed the feeling. I think most of us do.
They find that it is the oxygen and the pressure. So even if you're just breathing air and you're still pressurized, they found some patients do have benefit just from that. So the pressure, it's that combination of the pressure and oxygen.
So I think that my skepticism for HBOT it has, like most things that have a place in science, one of the reasons we have this show and doctors do go to the lounge, because we wouldn't go to the lounge. We could just talk on the floor if we were like, well, this is the fact and this is the fact and this is the box that we check. But when we're in the lounge and you're having a coffee or a Coke or whatever you're drinking, you start talking about, well, this is kind of interesting. This is kind of cool. What do you think? You're trying to get the subjective analysis of another person that you respect. So HBOT was one of those things that got some initial data that was interesting. It makes physiologic sense. We know it works in helping to wound heal better. We know it works when someone has a bubble because they had a decompression injury from coming up from diving. I mean, that's an emergency, right? So we know that if that person has a potential spinal cord or other problem, we
make that bubble small again.
Smaller. So we know it works for specific things. It's insurance covered for those things. It's got to be in all the major trauma hospitals. So we know it works. It's not placebo. The question is, how does it work for these other things? And the data, particularly around cognitive impairment, wasn't great, but seems to be improving.
Well, and they're also using it in other countries. So in Europe, they do use it post-stroke. So they have the data on that indication. And
what about the ability, both I guess in Europe and here, the ability for compliance, being able to do it every day or 5 days a week for about what, an hour before you're in and out?
It's the sessions last between 60 and 90 minutes under pressure. So then it takes you a little bit of time to get to pressure. It takes you a little bit of time to get you back up to surface level. So so the treatments are not quick. But if you have somebody that has an issue, that time is well spent because they get better.
So back to my analogy with the spas. So you need to go a bunch of times. You need to have the financial capacity to do it because probably a few $100s each session. Maybe you buy a package or what have you, but still it's a real monetary investment. But the studies showing the telomeres seem to show, and telomeres, just to remind everybody, are kind of the ribbon ends, kind of like a shoelace at the end of the tips at the end of a shoelace that kind of keep everything together. That's
they elongate
on our DNA, and to keep it longer means that you might have more life to live. And that's the sort of the way they sort of fray becomes sort of you're closer to the end. So improvement in that seems to have been unequivocally done.
Yeah, I've had multiple patients now that we do their telomere length before starting the treatments. We do it at 30, and then we will do it again at 60, and you can see the increase in length. So it
definitely works.
It definitely works. But
the only thing we're not sure of, because you'd have to have 30 years to do the study, is whether that gives you, longer life.
Yes.
But the theoretical thought is that would work. So you have all of those things. It takes at least 4 sessions. Let's talk about the dry sauna, for instance. So the Finnish study showed great benefit from that. We can infer cognitive improvement from that based on all of the markers that they did. But it took about 4 sessions a week.
Yes.
And there weren't long sessions. But they were sessions of, I want to say it was at least 20, 30 minutes in a sauna.
Which is not bad.
No, it's lovely. Listen, I'm putting one in the house,
There we go.
which is crazy because it's 1,000 degrees in Florida right now anyways, and I got a jacuzzi, but I am going to add this dry sauna, so it's just another way to kind of lie down. Now, there is an interesting sort of caveat to it. You can get to a particular heat where cerebral blood flow actually diminishes. So it's got to be a range of heat. Usually I think the number is about 170 plus degrees, but not to exceed too much more than that. And I think the key is, and not to brag, but I did get to spend a little time. I was asked to speak at NASA a couple of years ago. Oh, I will brag. That was one of my coolest days.
That was good.
That was really cool. And we were talking about looking at really what is now called the lymphatics, or the lymphatics that drain the brain. And that perspective seems to have a sweet spot. So when you go in a sauna, there can be a time where your blood flows open up and you're able to drain and improve maybe for lack of better terms, neuroplasticity. It's probably the wrong term, but improve brain function by optimizing vascularity. But there's a point of diminishing return. There's a point that, and one would know that, right? I feel woozy. So I'm putting in the sauna in the house, because we're at the doctor's lounge talking about our personal stuff, putting a sauna in the house. But it has to have a lay flat. And being almost 6'5", I got to have a long one.
Yes.
So it's going to be a little intrusive, but I'm going to have one that I can lay flat so that my brain gets the maximum benefit of the heat.
Yes.
So these are like little things that take us back to what you and I are so passionate about, which is individualizing medicine.
Yes.
Because one person's sauna could be standing up too hot and could actually be hurting them. Another person's could be giving them, improved life and cognition.
Yes.
So it is really important to get that through our, through our intake. Oh, can you tell everybody, you do one of the coolest things that I just was so happy to hear that you did it without even me mentioning it, because I had been working on a project with a friend about what is called, what is the term when you take the notes autonomously?
It's the AI scribe.
Yeah, but there's a term for it. It's I'll think of it in a minute. But ambient, is it ambient scribing or ambient intelligence, where basically you're sitting, talking to the patient, and a scribe is capturing everything the patient's saying and putting it into a format that you could utilize. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I just have it on my phone, and it's listening into the conversation, as we're talking. So I'm not typing. I'm actually, talking with the patient, and at the end, it becomes a medical note. So all the random things that we say that really shouldn't be in the note, it kind of ignores all that and just has like the facts of what we were talking about.
That's really amazing. Yeah. So even the patient feels better that they were heard, because they were heard, and it's noted, and all those little bit of subtle things. Yeah,
there's little things that, like even when you're having the conversation, and they said something and it didn't kind of register in my head, but then it's in the note and be like, oh, that's, that was what they were talking about. Or so it just kind of gives you what was said during that whole visit. And it's much easier than me typing, because that wouldn't work.
Well, we get back to the original part of the discussion where we're not challenging ourselves. Talking about really not challenging yourself, but it is a big. People don't realize, like, if you can not look at your EMR and look at the patient in the eye and get all those subtle things that no AI can do right now, which is pick up the nuances of what we were trained to do in medical school, which is, looking at a patient, getting body language, getting your instinct, your gut, the vagus nerve that gives you this sort of gut-brain axis working. So to be able to add all those bits of instinct to a patient, discussion is intake or visit, I think is going to be the key to success for this new type of medicine 3.0 or longevity medicine.
Because we're not staring at the screen trying to figure out what buttons we're supposed to be clicking at this point in time.
Box somebody fits in. You can really take it, personalize it, put all of it with their new types of blood testing, put it into longevity AI or whatever form software that you use, and sort of have an idea of who this person is and what you can do to maximize their life.
It's very helpful, because like those initial visits are usually an hour long, so we're talking for an hour. And so imagine trying to just type all that. This just is very helpful.
Yeah. Listen, as your friend, your colleague, and your patient, can't sort of thank you enough for giving us another great episode of Soffer Longevity, the Doctor's Lounge for longevity medicine. And I look forward to our discussions next week. And I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today, and look forward to seeing everybody in our next segment, and wanted to thank our sponsors, Longevity AI, and all of you that have either listened or watched us. Remember to tell your friends, subscribe, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks so much.